Okay. All right, we'll get started. All righty. Okay, Mia Huen, everyone. My name is Taria Smith. I'm Kauai and a member from Torres Martinez Reservation, the editor of News from Native California magazine, and the director of the Haiti Berkeley Roundhouse program. Thank you all so much for joining us today for the second program in Heyday and News from Native California's Sheltering Inspiration series. I'd like to start by asking you all to join me and all of us at Heyday in acknowledging that the region we now call California sits within the traditional homelands of more than 100 federally recognized and more than 50 non-federally recognized tribal nations. We respect and honor past, present, and future generations of tribal people across the state and their continued connection to the beautiful land we're privileged to be on, and we give our respect to all of these First Peoples. Today, I'm so excited because we have Tonga artist River Garza with us today. And I've known River for quite a few years now, and I'm super proud of all of the amazing things he's been doing as an artist. So it's so exciting, River, to see you have so many wonderful opportunities for all of your hard work. And so I'm hoping to turn things over to you now to introduce yourself and share some of your work.
Right. Miha, welcome everyone. Hello, I'm River Garza. Before I get started, I just want to say thank you to Taria and all the folks at Heyday for putting on this event, and to all of you that are able to join us today for giving your time to listen to me speak about my work. Immensely grateful and humbled to be speaking today. It's a wonderful opportunity, and yeah, I'm just thankful for all of you for joining us here today. Let's see, can you pull up the PowerPoint? I usually like to start these type of conversations talking about myself, my work, and where I started as an artist. So I'll get started on my journey, I suppose. I guess it's rather cliche, but one of those artists that has been making art pretty much all of my life. I was very fortunate to grow up in a household where I was encouraged to pursue art and create art. My mom is an artist. She's a traditional artist, works primarily with gourds and jewelry making. So growing up, there was always art supplies and around the house, and my mom working on projects on our kitchen table. So these memories are engraved into my mind. And also having the opportunity to mess around with these stuff as a young person. My mom was, like I mentioned, encouraging. So I think that really fostered my just early interest in making stuff and seeing the process of making, and just the philosophy that goes behind making work. I just really admire the work that my mom does and still makes today. So that was a big influence. And a lot of my early interest came from doing graffiti. I started doing graffiti when I was 11 years old, and I was in middle school. And it just really opened my eyes to a different realm of art. Prior to that, I had never been to, or during that time, I had never been to an art museum or any of these art institutions that surround the city of Los Angeles. I was exposed to art in the streets, and that just really left a big impact on me. I think like for a lot of working class folks, a lot of working class communities, there's always artists in these communities, but we don't always have access to the tools and resources to create, quote unquote, or, fine art or conventional fine art. So, artists in the streets and artists like myself would rely on the materials that we did have access to, and, utilize the landscape around us to create works of art. So that was a really big influence for me. And I did graffiti up until my 20s. And I was in college really. And it wasn't until my second year as a college student when I started painting on canvas. I was fortunate enough that some of my friends invited me over to work on a collaborative piece. And that was my first time really picking up a paintbrush. I didn't have any formal training or experience. I took one drawing class in college, but it was working on like composition and things of that nature. So no real painting or anything like that. So I taught myself, and a lot of my early work is more collage based. Can you go to the next slide, please? And with a lot of that work, So the piece to the left is an example from when I was first starting to paint and create things. And this piece right here, grandmother, has depictions of relations on my maternal side of the family, or my Tonga side. There's my grandmother up there, my great grandmother, great great grandmother. So I guess during this time, a lot of that work really followed this color palette. A lot of these like red, earthy tones, but I feel like the work during that time was me trying to express my family heritage in some form of art. Because during that time, I was already had cultivated an interest in art and starting to pay attention to, fine art, and I guess like fine artists, teaching myself about the art world and realm. And I think like also learning about indigenous artists as well, and just kind of seeing a lack of representation, I think, from my own community, California indigenous artists. So a lot of that early work was really, I think, trying to express myself and kind of tell people, or I don't know, express about my family heritage, and doing that by showing pictures of my family. And also in the piece to the left, there's a documentation from correspondence from the Bureau of Indian Affairs that my grandfather sent in like the 70s. So bringing in the family heritage, but also how I think some folks we come to understand ourselves through interactions with different government agencies. Our relationship with the government is very complex, and I don't know, some of these things that have always been around the house that I've seen, but started to make more sense as I got older. So starting to incorporate this stuff into my work. And the piece to the left, I made about a year later. And it's a little bit definitely different in style, more expressive. I think kind of touches base with my interest in graffiti and also traditional forms of art. Petroglyphs and pictographs are a huge influence on my work, and also traditional basketry as well. So during this time, I was starting to incorporate these motifs in my work, and also bring in aspects of like traditional culture as well that I see. There's a coyote right there who's integral to our creation story for a lot of my tribe and many others. So I just wanted to paint coyote, and for herself, for my tribe, and for me, I'm a member of Tiat Society. So I was fortunate enough at a young age to be immersed in traditional culture through Tiat Society, learning about our maritime traditions and those customs. So coyote there has a paddle, and that is a homage to our maritime culture, and having on a traditional grass skirt. And yeah, I think it's just a really interesting piece that I was creating during that time. But I think you can start to see the evolution of my work, gravitating a little bit away from like heavy collage based stuff, more towards painting, abstract, some figurative work. But yeah, I think during that time, like when I was first starting to paint, the concept of painting seemed so challenging and so like grandiose. I think, for me, like studying primarily like the Western canon of artists and seeing like, what is considered painting, it just seemed like such a daunting task, having no knowledge or training to create these works of art. So I just started to embark on that process, and this is what was this was going on during that time. Can you go to the next slide, please? But I've been very lucky throughout my career as an artist, or these years I've been creating art, been able to cultivate wonderful relationships, and I've been able to find mentors along the way. Jake Fragua is a good friend of mine and a mentor, and really helped me early in my career and honing in my artistic voice. Like I'd mentioned, it seemed like such a daunting task, and I knew I wanted to create these things, but I didn't know how to go about them. And I was fortunate enough to meet him and really go under his tutelage, and kind of help me really cultivate my voice and become comfortable with creating things, and trusting my own gut feeling when it comes to making work. So I just wanted to mention that. And the piece to the left is, I think, in a similar vein to the coyote piece, starting to gravitate away from those collage-based works. And this one, I think, is a really interesting piece, and kind of, to me, captivates or captures some of the experience of what it is to be like, it's the California Indian in general. And there's references to things in the greater culture, but also things that are very tribally specific. Like the motif at the bottom is based on California indigenous basketry. There's petroglyphs and pictographs in there, but also comments on different aspects of our shared culture and shared history. There's a reference. There's the Indians welcome thing at the top is a reference to some signage that was on Alcatraz Island during the occupation way back when. And also there's verbiage in there. This is Momarihiko, which is the name of our tiat, our traditional canoe. So, bringing in these influences, but also things in pop culture as well. This is John Wayne's Teeth, Heya, which is a reference to Smoke Signals, a movie that I'm sure all of us have seen at some point in time. And also a map of LA. So all of, at the very top portion. So all of these things I think are starting to come into what I was starting to create, gravitating away from focusing solely like on my family, my familial heritage, and talking about, I guess our shared culture and history as Indigenous people. There's that figure in the middle right there with the Billy Jack type hat. But this is still like a collage-based piece, mixed media, incorporating different mediums. And during this time, I became more comfortable with starting to experiment with the tools that I was using, the mediums. Bringing in spray paint, markers, things that I would use when I was writing graffiti and on the streets, and starting to incorporate them into fine art. So that was really fun, and it's still something that I practice today. And the work to the right is By the Dream. It's a play on the American Spirit tobacco company, tobacco logo. And to me, this piece really is like a social commentary on the commodification, not only of our culture, but our traditional medicine as well. And I think, so much of this gets overlooked in mainstream Western society, but as Indigenous folks, Indigenous community members, we're well aware of it, right? And yeah, it's just something that as always I've constantly wrestled with is, how our culture gets commodified and, overlooked in so many ways. For my tribe and many others, like tobacco is one of our, sacred plants, it's medicine. So, and it's just, I don't know, troubling to me to not only see like the motif that's being used, like very much like a stereotypical caricature, and, medicine being sold itself in a like as a consumer marketable item. So, this is just a play on that, and also talking about this idea of Americanness. I think it also coalesces and co-aligns with capitalist ideology, and I think the two are rather interchangeable. So it's a commentary on that as well. But yeah, interesting piece. Can you go to the next slide, please? And this is another mixed media piece that I created, again utilizing spray paint, acrylic, and a bunch of different mediums. And right here, I think is in a similar vein to the capitalist spirit piece, kind of playing on, to me, on notions of spirituality, commodification. I think, so much of how the general public or, non-native folks interpret Indigenous communities is through, film and media, especially Hollywood. This concept of like the celluloid Indian, of who people think we are. So yeah, to me, this is kind of playing on that, and also like playing on like signage and things that you see like around the city. So much of, I see like neon signs and advertisements everywhere. We're, constantly bombarded, especially in Los Angeles in the urban settings. So this is kind of an homage to that, right? Like seeing those like house for sale type signs or whatever, buy your house in cash now type thing. But kind of to be also being funny about it, like, right. At the bottom, it says spirituality for sale, which is a little term or motif that I've used in several paintings. But yeah, playing on this concept, right, of like, I guess like consumable spirituality, if that makes any sense, or the way I think that some folks interpret like our spirituality, our medicine can be a marketable good, but in many ways it isn't. So this is me kind of toying with that idea, right? It says like real at the top, and, kind of playing with the idea of like what is real, native art, what isn't, what is authentic, this idea of authenticity. And also like it says like cliche on the left, wisdom for sale. So these little funny quips, like I think I try to be critical at some points in time with my work, but also use humor as a tool to create this criticism and talk about some of like the funny things I think that are going on in our community in Indian country. So it's a rather large piece, but I think it's really good. And yeah, it's an interesting piece. Can you go to the next slide, please? So these works right here are definitely in the vein of like social commentary, or just the kind of the way that I see and interpret events. Powwows are an important cultural event in many ways, but also as a non-traditional practice or gathering for California Indigenous people. It's something that came along with relocation, and so yeah, like I don't know, it's like one of those events that like I've always gone to powwows as a kid, and they're like, interesting events, because like a lot of the times, like I think of like going to like Cal State Long Beach powwow, which is one that I frequented forever, and this is on our traditional land, Puvungna, in a land of importance and sacredness really for us. But this, like, we have these cultural events that go on, right? These powwows of all these different tribes, but at the same time, it feels like, I don't know, like our community, other California Indigenous communities are kind of like not on the wayside, but I don't know how to express, like, just one of those things that is like complex, interesting. We're there, we're participating, but not really, it doesn't really represent like our traditional customs and our traditional gatherings. So, and what I have going on in these paintings is like little commentaries, little funny notes I have about like a powwow, what would go on there. Like it says like Chinese Pendleton blankets, so kind of commenting on like the funny items you'll see being sold. And right there it says like how many raffle on the piece to the right, how many raffle tickets will it take to get my tribe's land back? Thinking about like the raffles that go on. But yeah, being funny about it, right? And it says like caution, California Indians enter in rear. So this kind of, that comment really speaks to the sense of like belonging, but also like being an outsider at these events as well, in many ways. But yeah, so I really like these pieces, and I think it's, to me, my perspective as a Tonga person, as a California Indigenous person, like attending these pan-Indian, pan-cultural events that are important to our community. But yeah, we all interpret these events in different ways, and this is not to speak brashly against powwows or anything, but just rather, I guess, speak towards my experience at them. Can you go to the next slide, please? And this piece also is, I think, very similar to the last ones. I made this after attending the Santa Fe Indian Market for the first time, which is a really interesting event that happens, I believe, in September, typically in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and it's huge. It's I was like a cultural mainstay, not only for the state, but for the Native art community as well. And I think it's a rather complex and interesting event, and the way that Native artists navigate these events is really interesting. It was amazing to see all the beautiful work that's there, but also, I guess, frustrating in many ways to see who is, able to purchase these items and who frequents these events. A lot of the times it's like non-Native folks, and a lot of like wealthy white patrons that go there to purchase, they go to the Southwest to experience like, I guess like indigenous land, whatever, and purchase Native art. And it's such a huge cultural institution for the state and a huge economic driver as well. And I always think about, the economics behind these types of events. Really, really interesting, because I think like at the end of the day, like who makes the most money off of this stuff is the tourist industry that, is heavily involved, the hotels, the restaurants, all these things. But what draws people there is the artists and the artwork. And I think it's just really complex how, artists, indigenous artists, Native artists, how we navigate, the market and try to sell our goods, sell our creations, and what that's like. In so many ways, it can be such a meaningful interaction. In other ways, it can be so distant and like a really consumer affair. It feels like at times. And what I have like in here is like, maybe we can go Indian dancing. Like I heard some older white folks say that as I was walking the streets in Santa Fe. So it's just interesting to see how they interact at these events. Really, really, very interesting. It's not to knock anybody that participates in these events, but be rather critical of the institutions, at play and what goes on there. But it's a bunch of amazing artists show their work there, and just really interesting, very interesting how, folks not only present themselves, but present their work at, during this event. It reminds me very much of like Disneyland. Like everything is very hyper, like, I don't know, like everything is to the upteenth level. I don't know how to describe it. You have to be there, but complex, just complex, very interesting event. Can you go to the next slide, please? And I think this piece also is very in a similar vein. This one speaks more to, I guess, like representation and how we represent ourselves, what people think we look like, especially at like, to me, this is like a little funny quip, if I get a big hat, then will I become a real Native artist? And again, playing on this idea of representation, how we, represent ourselves, how we present ourselves to the public, different different scenes really, right? And for some people, like this hat has become like a not a clue, but like gives you some insight. Oh, okay, like they're wearing this hat, etc. You know, you assume they're a native person, native artist, whatever. And to me, it's just kind of playing on that. Like if I were in the streets, like walking around, like people wouldn't automatically assume that I'm Tonga, I'm an indigenous person. But I think like in certain scenes, in certain scenarios, certain artists, certain people will play into this, right? This ideology or this perception that folks have of us. And this is kind of just talking about that and me being funny about it. Can you go to the next slide, please? And this piece right here is really cool and interesting. I was fortunate enough to collaborate with Jake Fragua on this mural, who's a Jemez Pueblo artist, and he did the caricatures to the right, and I did the map portion to the left. And I think this is a really important piece. It's done in Indian Alley, which is a place of cultural significance for the Tonga community and the outside Native community as well. Everyone else that's here. And I was very fortunate enough to paint this place. I'm, I think, one of the few Tonga artists that have had the opportunity to paint here. But I think I really love this piece. It's a map of LA that depicts our traditional village sites. Not all of them, but some. And I just felt it was really important when I had this opportunity to paint here. I wanted to create something that, is meaningful in a way, but also like a tool. Because so many people visit this place when they're coming to LA. It's one of those like, I don't want to say like historic landmark, but one of the like sites you want to see if you're a native person visiting LA. You want to go see Indian Alley and see all the artwork, all the murals that indigenous artists from a bunch of communities have created. So it's a wonderful space, and has really been transformed because it's in the heart of Skid Row in LA. So a place that has seen a lot of trauma, historically through time, but has, turned to a place of beauty. So yeah, and I think, Skid Row has a very traumatic history, and especially this place. And part of what I wanted to do and how I can contribute was, create this tool. So when people that are visiting or people that are where LA is home to them, to give this visual guide and utilize, these markers to understand like, that the land around them, is still, indigenous land, is Tonga land, but most importantly has a name. And I think, as so much of our world, or especially Los Angeles, has been urbanized, and we don't see much of the natural land. And I think part of, breaking away from these toxic relationships with the land is starting to, know the name of the land. I think that's important and integral to starting to heal the land around us, is to understand that it has a name and a place. And especially for people that grow up here. So I meet folks all the time that, number one, have probably never heard of our tribe. And then number two, don't know, the traditional name of the land that they live on and reside in. So I think it's important as a teaching tool, but also a guide as well. And a part of this piece, I wanted to, stick with the same vein of trying to create like mixed media collage work. So it's kind of hard to see from this distance, but in the wall, or on the wall, there's also some wheat pastings of flyers from our old Tiat gatherings, our old Momadihiko voyages from like the early 90s. So I have that at the top. And also there's like shells inlaid into the wall as well. So again, playing on our connection to the ocean and my connection to our maritime customs and traditions. And at the top, there's tobacco ties. And it's not so much to be a portion of the art itself, but to me, it's leaving an offering, because this place has seen so much trauma and pain. And to me, that's, it's important for me to leave an offering in this space for, the spirits and the ancestors that have come through there. So really interesting piece. And yeah, I love this fair, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to work with Jake on this. Can you go to the next slide, please? And so this work right here, the piece to the left is a serigraph that I was fortunate enough to create under the tutelage of Joel Garcia and the folks when he was still at Self Help Graphics. Was in collaboration with Self Help Graphics. And that work really is an homage to Momadihiko Tiat Society and my involvement and my family's involvement in Tiat Society throughout the years. So you see the verbiage right there, Momadihiko, which means breath of the ocean in our language. And there's an image of the Tiat at the bottom or in the middle, and some of our community members at the bottom. And again, utilizing these old flyers and posters we have from our voyages back in the day. So there's those also to the left. But yeah, really interesting work, and it was wonderful to understand the printing process and bring something that was really, near, dear, and personal to me. So yeah, I just love that piece and was grateful to be able to work with the folks at Self-Help in creating that. And the work to the right is another collage-based piece, and this was made in 2019, and things were taught. And I made this work as a graduate student when I was studying sociology. And I think this piece really captures my, I guess, internal struggle as a student trying to navigate the academy. I think it's really challenging in a number of ways. And someone like myself, I come from an ethnic studies background, my undergrad, and shifting towards sociology was a challenge for me, not doing the work, but I guess just the way it would resonate with me. Sociology is a very Eurocentric study, anthropocentric field of study. And I don't know, it just really didn't resonate after a while. Like I did excellent in school, but the content just wasn't resonating. Like reading Marx, reading Durkheim, reading all of these important people in the canon of sociological work. And I don't know, a lot of things just weren't adding up. Like I think a lot of it is rests in its Eurocentric nature, and it doesn't really make sense to me as an Indigenous person. So I was really just struggling connecting with the content. And at the bottom is like a little quip right there. It says Karl Marx can't teach this. And I think that's just really talking about, my experience as an Indigenous person, because more often than not in the academy, our experience as Indigenous people and how we perceive the world is oftentimes not only left out, but discredited, or not seen as, or oftentimes seen as intellectually inferior, I think, in many spaces and times. So, I was fortunate enough to have folks that were, supportive in what I wanted to do, but I think the overall feel and just the nature of, that field of study just really clashed with my interests. So I think this piece really, really captures that. It also says like paint from the soul, like Nina Simone. So that's, to me, creating homages to artists that I think are important in work that, maybe time won't make it to the academy or get discussed in the academy. So yeah, I think this piece really captures that. But yeah, really interesting work. I think really just captures where I was at that time in school. Can you go to the next slide, please? And this piece right here was a commission for the show We Rise. And it's, what the city gave us. And the idea behind this piece, and I was commissioned to create work that captured, I guess, like how I interpret mental health in Los Angeles and for the Indigenous community. And a lot of the motifs in here are talking about, or in reference to not only LA, but yeah, like to me, like a big part of mental health is the health of the land around us. And I think I really wanted to capture that, as a city, so much of I think a lot of the times people forget that it's indigenous land, but this land is sacred, despite it being urbanized. And, a lot of our sacred sites aren't the way they were, but, the land is still important. And, cultivating the relationship with the land around us and maintaining the land around us is, a part of our duty as indigenous people, as Tonga people, for us in particular, to maintain, the relationships that we have in the best way that we possibly can. So I think for me, our mental health is deeply tied to the land around us. And I just wanted to capture that in this piece. But yeah, kind of all over the place, like bringing, references to the seal of Los Angeles, which is right there in the middle in the right-hand corner, which has been changed recently and now has like a woman carrying a basket with acorns in the middle. So bringing that, a mission a little depiction of a mission in the mural, or a mission in the middle, with a bunch of arrows going through, and that's kind of speaking to, the troubling and traumatic history and genocide that occurred within the mission system. So speaking to that, a history that many times gets overlooked and not talked about, but also rather not, other things as well. As Los Angeles is sacred. I think that's important to remind people, as they navigate LA. Can you go to the next slide, please? And this piece right here is a mixed media work that I really love. And this is talking about really the crisis at the border and what's going on. The children in cages, families being incarcerated for something that, this idea of borders and the idea of a state and nation is so new for us as Indigenous people. I think in many ways it's modeled on Eurocentric and Western ideas of the nation and state and borders. Because in the past, borders were just a line in the sand, right? An agreement between two communities. But now they become militarized and places of such contention. And it's complex because communities are split, by these borders. I think of like Kumeyaay folks down south, in California, tribes in Arizona and Texas that are split in these ways because of, colonial governments' agreements with each other. But I think this piece really speaks to that. My interpretation of it as an Indigenous person, and also someone of Mexican descent as well. But in this work, all kinds of different imaging going on in a variety of mediums. I utilize screen printing in this. So there's like the definition of the border right there that I screen printed in there. And I also stitched in wire fencing. So there's like aluminum fencing on this canvas that I stitched in with red yarn. And at the bottom, there's a quote by Gloria Anzaldúa from her Borderlands book, speaking about the border. And also a clipping on the right from a 1960s textbook, talking about the border again. And right there, I have borders are a colonial construct because I deeply believe that they are. And also, there's a little quote at the top that says, Caravaggio don't know shit about this. And Caravaggio is a Renaissance painter. And to me, this is like speaking about, again, like, as I struggling with the Western canon of art. And as I study art and see these, important works in the art canon, in the art world, like so much of it doesn't resonate with me as an Indigenous person, as a Tonga person. So, people can study all of these fantastic artists or, thinkers like Marx and Durkheim, like I mentioned, but so much of it, again, doesn't resonate with me as an Indigenous person. So this is kind of speaking to that. And my contention and frustration with the Western art world, and I guess how I fit in as an artist and how Indigenous people fit in as well. Can you go to the next slide, please? And these works right here are a little bit more interesting. I made the work to the left while in residency at Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe. And it's titled Custer's Last Portrait, and it's supposed to be a depiction of General Custer. But I think it's a really interesting work. And with this type of work, I think how my art has grown or changed in many ways is incorporating just a variety of materials. And I think like outside interests that are, not so much reflective of my Indigenous heritage, but rather my interests. Custer is a interesting figure in history, especially with the Native communities, right? But in that piece, I also have like an oldies reference. It says Cowboys to Girls, which is an oldies song that I like. And also like stamps. I came across a stamp collection and I'm like, what am I going to do with all these stamps? So I just started incorporating them in my art. And so it's a bunch of interesting figures throughout history. At the top has memory in there as well, thinking about these historical figures, the few victories that, us Indigenous folks do have and did have. So harkening towards that. And the work to the right is an homage to John Coltrane, who's one of my favorite musicians and artists. And I wanted to create an homage to him and other jazz musicians that I love. So like in there is like John Coltrane and in the front, like Art Blakey in the back and Miles Davis and all of these jazz musicians that I'm really fond of. This is an homage to him and kind of a little bit different than some of my other work, but again, paying homage to artists and people that I admire. I love this piece. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. And the work to the left is another piece I created while in residency at IAIA. And right there, the title of it is Johnny Depp Indian Warrior. And I made this piece right after or during the time when like the Dior Sauvage campaign came out. And I'm sure many of you have seen the commercial that went on with that, which is, I don't know, weird. I guess like the most simplistic way of putting it. But I don't know, complicated, and I think it's funny, just like what goes on in Indian native country. So this is just really a play on that, and just how our culture still to this day gets commodified and commercialized. And I just wonder who gave them the cosign to do that. But yeah, this is just speaking to that, and to be funny about it. Put Johnny Depp Indian Warrior, crossing out the Savage Sauvage. And at the top, it says like, put a bird on it, which is like a reference to Portlandia, like, again, bringing these pop culture references and things that I like and think are funny. But yeah, it's like him, to me, this is like Johnny Depp dressed up as Tonto, right? From The Lone Ranger and Tonto. That's him with the bird on his head. So I don't know, just talking about that. To me, at times, it's really, really easy to create works like this, like these more cultural commentary works, because of all just like the nonsense and goofy stuff that goes on. So this is again, like making these critical analysis, but also being funny and using humor as the tool to talk about these things. And the work to the right is a portrait of James Luna. This is a piece that I started while in residency and finished later on towards the new year. And James Luna is one of my favorite artists, such an amazing thinker, just conceptually amazing, mind-blowing. If you've never seen his work, highly suggest you check it out. And as a performance artist, I just think it's really captivating, and just turns, like, I don't know, I guess Western conceptions of indigenous people, especially in the field of anthropology, art. He takes all these things and creates just amazing performance pieces. And this is an homage to him. I have such an amazing library, and I was just captivated by all the books that they had there. And I was fortunate enough to come across this James Luna book about one of his works when he was put on his show at the Venice Biennale, and just really studying his work there. And I had the opportunity to really delve deep into his philosophy and as an artist, how he creates and what, inspires him conceptually. But yeah, it says, like, has a depiction of him and this outfit that he would wear, and a reference to one of a piece that he did, a performance piece, or just take a picture with a real Indian. So I have that at the top, and I read somewhere that he was like a big fan of Spam, so I decided to include like a can of Spam in there, right? But yeah, I really love this work, and I was fortunate enough to interact with some of his relatives. Actually reached out to me and just commented that they saw this work and loved this piece. So I was very, very humbled by that and grateful. But yeah, James is an amazing artist. Can you go to the next slide, please? And these paintings were for a show that was supposed to happen, supposed to do in residency in Italy, but that got postponed due to the pandemic. But I created this body of work for that, and it's a recreation or rendition of the previous painting that I showed you, just in a bunch of different colors. But yeah, so I really love these pieces. I think they're interesting, and just kind of wanted to play with the colorways. And I don't know, I guess it's like an homage to pop artists like Andy Warhol, right, that use repetition as one of their means to convey an idea. So this is an homage to that. Can you go to the next slide, please? And this work right here, these are some newer pieces that I've been creating. Again, shifting away, I guess, from pieces that are more critical and more representative of my background as an Indigenous person, and more shifting towards like my own interest in like what I love. Creating during the pandemic has been interesting and trying for me for a variety of reasons. Just facing personal adversity, and a part of that, like finding the, I guess, drive to create was difficult at times. And for me, how I got back into wanting to create and finding, joy in the process of creating was just really returning to the things that I love. And I'm like a huge sports fanatic. So I just wanted to create pieces that, talk about that make me happy, that I can capture figures, moments in time that I've, shared with other people, or just that remain near and dear to my heart. Right there is the piece to the left is titled Black Mamba, and is a homage to Kobe Bryant, who unfortunately passed away earlier this year. And for, folks in the city of Los Angeles, like Kobe Bryant is, I don't know, cultural icon doesn't even begin to capture it. He's next level. I don't know, godly in many ways for many of us. So I'm a huge Laker fan and Kobe Bryant fan growing up as, a basketball fanatic. I'm, a native folk star. So yeah, this is an homage to him. And that one is done in ink. I love drawing too, outside of painting. And the work to the right is Clash of Titans, which features Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan when they faced off against each other in an All-Star game way back when. So again, like me trying to find joy in creating and just like creating and kind of reliving these moments that are near and dear in my heart and mind. So these are some of the newer work that I've created as of late. Yeah, can you go to the next slide, please? And these are some more recent pieces that I have made. The work to the left is actually a greeting card that I did in collaboration with San Diego Institute of Arts. We did like a project where they had like a marketplace because they're supposed to have a show that I was supposed to participate in. And since the pandemic happened, like cultural institutions like art museums have shut down for the time being. And they tried to shift their engagement and help support artists by opening up this marketplace. So I created a bunch of greeting cards for that. And this is one of them. Mixed media work, again, utilizing this abundance of stamps that I have. But yeah, it has like references to, again, musicians that I like, and these abstract figures that I enjoy painting. And I've always kind of like drawn in this way. And I think it's been more reflective in the work that I've created as of late. Like my sketchbooks look very much like this, these pieces. So I think it's just kind of me gravitating towards producing work that feels more organic and intuitive, if that makes any sense. So right there in the piece to the left, there's a John Coltrane song reference, "A Love Supreme," which is one of my favorite songs he's ever composed. I love that song. And also at the bottom is like this a stamp where it says, "Sometimes I dream I look like Mona Lisa." So again, creating these little, like, I think funny fine art references or references to the art realm. But yeah, so I love works like this. And the piece to the left is something that I just finished up within the past week. So I'm grateful to share some of my newer work with you all. And this one is, again, like, I would say like, just really like random, kind of, it just, again, encapsulates and captures just my different eclectic areas of interest and like what I love in pop culture and in art as well. So like it says at the top, like, "Good for health, bad for education," has this little pill. And that is a reference to Akira, the anime from way back in the 80s. I love that movie and the anime genre in general. Grew up reading a lot of manga and stuff like that as a youngster. So that art style and way of storytelling has always resonated with me and has been something that I hold near and dear to my heart. So bringing in these different areas of interest for me and kind of sharing them, what I think is like cool and interesting. But also, so yeah, there's different references in there as well to that movie, to that film. But also I use like this little like stripey type pattern, and that to me is a homage to traditional basketry and our traditional motifs that we use. So bringing in, pop culture stuff, but also things that are traditional and older. And I like to use words a lot, or verbiage in my paintings. Right there it says, "There's no place like home," which is like a reference to Wizard of Oz and things like that. And I think I love to use text in a lot of my pieces, because to me it's such a direct way of communicating. I think a lot of works of art may be, left up to interpretation, really, right? But I think utilizing words is such a direct way to convey a point or an idea or a concept. So I like to utilize that, just as a tool. But it's more recent piece, and yeah. Can you go to the next slide? Or I think that might be the last slide. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it looks like that's the end. Let me stop the share there.
Okay.
Okay. Hold on. Let me get back to the Zoom screen. Can't see us here. Okay, there we are. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your presentation. I absolutely love your work, and I'm so proud of how you've grown as an artist and all of the recognition that you're getting for all of the amazing work that you do. We have one question so far. I have a bunch, but there's one in the chat, and it says, and it's asking if you can please talk more about your choice to respond with humor and satire to the commodification of Native culture.
Yeah, I think it's such a lofty and complex, subject in the way, indigenous folks and different communities are going to interpret that, in a variety of different ways. Some folks, may see it as okay. Others, maybe they don't, but I don't know. To me, I think utilizing humor is a reflective of our, traditional culture and how how we articulate our problems and how we talk about things. Humor is such an important device. But yeah, because to me it's so easy, and I think like especially for a lot of my earlier work, like it was easy to be so critical of things, right? And I guess to be like young and frustrated with the world, really, right? As I come to understand the different interlocking systems of oppression that influence our daily life, and at times it feels so like frustrating and daunting, and the only way to tackle these such like heavy topics is to be funny about them. So that's why I utilize humor and satire in a lot of my work. I guess it's one of like the ways that we cope as people, right? To talk about these things that are troubling and problematic and traumatizing in many ways. So that's where humor comes into play for me.
Thank you. Yeah, I could say as a California Native person that I have a lot of appreciation for that work and for that humor, because I attach a lot of incidents or things that have happened, just or experiences that we had, and so to be able to kind of attach it and laugh at it. Like for example, I really really love the powwow pieces, the powwow, and then in powwow round two, just because I found myself in situations where pan-Indianism has kind of caused a type of invisibility for me as a California Native person. Like for example, some years back when we had the gathering for the anniversary for the magazine, and it was at the Autry, so there were people there that weren't really associated with the party that were kind of walking through, and stuff. And so at the end of the event, we had bird singers and dancers and everything like that, and there was a gentleman who had come by and was asking us why we weren't playing drums. And I tried to explain to him, that we don't do that here and that sort of thing like that, or the tribe that this group comes from, they play rattles and everything. And he couldn't get past it. Like he just couldn't, like Indians are supposed to play drums. Like, I mean, it was just, and so finally I ended up just, because he was there for like 15 minutes asking me about this stuff. And so I said, well, maybe you should talk to one of the singers, And so those sorts of things like that. And then also when that piece, I have been wanting to talk to you about it for a long time, the Santa Fe Indian Market piece. I really have an appreciation for that. And I'm sure a lot of people do, because there is sort of now like an opulence to the event. Like I've never been, because I don't want to go, because I don't think that, because I'm poor basically. And I'm just like, some folks from, some wealthier Native folks had asked me if I had ever been. I said, no, I said, I don't have enough money to go to the Santa Fe Indian Market. But have you found that there's a difference between the way Native people or California Native people respond to your art and then other folks, respond to your art? That's another thing too that I find in the works of James Luna and Gerald Clark too, is that depending on where you're coming from, you're having a completely different experience with the artwork.
Absolutely. And Gerald Clark is another influence of mine, amazing artist, and really funny with his work as well. But absolutely, like brain is all over the place right now. But yeah, I think a lot of my work speaks to just my experience as a California Indian person, how we experience things. I think is at times different, like definitely different, and just speaks to the uniqueness of that. Like speaking about powwows and like the symbolic forms of tokenism that go on during these events, and like you mentioned, like do render this sense of invisibility. And I felt that like as a youngster, and even more as I become an adult, become more critical of these things, and just more, I guess, more conscious and aware of what goes on, and just how much of it isn't reflective of our traditional culture. But there are like elements as well. Like seeing bird singers there is like to me was always comforting. Like, yeah, like, you know, I love hearing like bird singers singing bird songs. But things like that, like, and just making me think about, that was really funny, like what you mentioned about the Santa Fe Indian market, not being able to afford things. And like, that's like one of the most mind-blowing things is like, there's so much amazing work, but I bet like half the artists there probably can't even afford to buy a piece from their fellow artists. And that's the thing too, that goes on with these events is like, they're marketed towards white people with money, like to be frank and straightforward. And that's, to me, that's really problematic. And like, as an artist and as I've created works, I've always wanted my artwork to be accessible to folks so I want like people to be able to buy my art. And I think that's a really important thing that sometimes gets lost as artists, you know, navigate the market and, you know, decide to participate in the market. But yeah, like, I don't know, that, and Santa Fe Indian Market is such a crazy event, what's going on. From like the pageantry that goes on behind it in the streets. And it's complex is the only way I can really, really think about, or the word that comes to encapsulate what I feel. But yeah, I don't know, like it was just really like weird to go there and like just see like just the you know, outrageously beautiful, like outrageous prices of things, like totally like, I don't know, out of reach for like the average Native person, you know, like most Native people I know are not like ballers or anything, you know? So like being like, I don't know, just really, really complex. And this made me think of accessibility to artwork, who artists are trying to sell to, why they're trying to sell different works. But it's like, it's complicated though, because I get it. Like a sale during that weekend, like that can, you know, that can help sustain your income for the entire year and provide for you. So I understand and I don't knock that and I respect that. That's part of it. And it's, you know, challenging how we all choose to play the game, you know, and how we navigate these spaces.
It's true. I remember I went to a talk with the illustrator Ricardo Cate, you know, who does he wrote the Without Reservations book and everything like that. And he talked about what you're talking about. He would go to Santa Fe Indian Market and it would be very financially difficult for him and his family to even be there, you know, as an artist, you know, they're like that they would have a very, very hard time because things were very expensive, you know, just the experience. So the Native people that are there showing their works a lot of time are even struggling. So it's I think that's why it's important that we have artists, because they, you know, you can interpret things. Because I mean, I can't, I am feeling those things, but I can't interpret those in a way that's relatable and funny, you know, and get people to understand things differently. We have another question, and it says, can you talk about how the pandemic has changed how you find or engage with other artists and art? Or do you have any tips for discovering new artists while cultural institutions are closed?
Dang, that was a loaded question.
Sorry, can I break it up?
No, it's okay. It's numerous parts. I'm sorry, can you repeat the first part for me?
Okay. Can you talk about how the pandemic has changed how you find or engage with other artists and art?
Yeah. I guess, yeah, I think a lot as of lately has shifted towards online, you know, interaction and engagement, which is interesting to see all of this come into fruition. I think it's rather new. Like it's in the past, it was more of like a nuanced way to engage with things, but now it's become like it seems like a standard, right? To hold meetings through Zoom and stuff like that and engage in this way. But yeah, I think that's how it's shifted and changed for me, is doing a lot more stuff online, because like museums and things are closed, like artist talks aren't really happening anymore in the more conventional way that we would think of them in person. So, but it's also like fascinating to be able to like do something like this from my home and have people, you know, maybe listen to this talk in the car or at home, wherever, you know, place is convenient. So, but it has its own unique set of challenges as well, because I really do relish the chance to engage with people in person and talk about my artwork and have those, you know, really intimate one-on-one moments and conversations with people that aren't going to happen online. So I miss that. But at the same time, and thinking about accessibility, right? Like the internet is accessible for most people. So, and I think that creates a greater opportunity for folks to share their work, get their work out there. but at the same time, there's an influx of artists and artwork out there. So I think it's also easy to kind of get lost in the abundance of content that's going out there as well. So it has its pros and cons, but definitely interesting to see how institutions are working towards, you know, adapting towards the pandemic and the current you know, climate of the world. So yeah, it's been interesting, and I'm just grateful for those institutions that I've been able to work with that have, you know, made a conscious effort to try to adapt and change things and work with artists in a way that makes sense now. And what was the second part of the question?
I think you got it, but I'll read it to you again. It says, any tips for discovering new artists while cultural institutions are closed? I think you might.
Yeah, the internet. Social media is a great way too, but yeah, it's, you know, there's a lot of work out there, so kind of hard to keep up at times.
Very cool. I know I had a bunch of questions that I had sent you, but I like ditched all of them because I was so, you know, I was so taken by the presentation. But I remember once, this was a long time ago when I used to work in television, and there was about 4 of us who went through LA, and we went to Indian Alley. It was closed, we couldn't get in, and there was all this, you know, amazing street art. And I remember we also went to the Getty, and I remember thinking, and I probably said it out loud, I said, there's better art on the street, you know, than there are in this place where, you know, where art is supposed to be this high, you know, important, you know, thing, you know, and it's in an institution. Can you talk about your experience as an artist in the art world? Do you find that you find yourself in spaces where, you know, it feels out of place and uncomfortable and everything like that? Not so much like places like the Santa Fe Indian Market, but other places other spaces of art and institutions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally does. And wonderful question, because not always feel uncomfortable, but a lot of the time I'm like, what am I doing here? You know, like not to be mean, because it's,
no, I remember I think you had sent out an Instagram at one point or something, and I think it was the opening event before the Indian Market last year at the Autry, and I remember you saying, is anybody here? Like,
yeah,
in the corner.
Yeah, like it's complicated. It's interesting and complex, because I come from a very working class background, so like by no means have I interacted in like these highbrow institutions, right? And like art is definitely one of those realms where it's very like highbrow, and attending like art openings and things like that, like interacting with like random people with like a lot of money that I would never interact with under any other circumstance is always weird for me, and gives me like a certain sense of like, I guess, angst and anxiety really when I come to some of these events. Like, you know, not seeing very many folks of color, number one. Number two, not seeing familiar faces is always challenging for me at times. But yeah, I don't know, like so much of the art world is very highbrow, you know, and like I'm not a blue chip artist by any means. And I think the artwork that I produce, it speaks to the working class, like indigenous experience, I like to think. And I don't know, these types of institutions and how we navigate them is always challenging, because they weren't set up for art people in the first place. And I don't know, it's always weird and complicated, but I do enjoy when there's snacks, so it always makes it a little bit.
That's true. Okay, we're very close to the hour. So
Okay.
if there was anything I didn't ask you that's important for people to know, anything that, oh gosh, I thought I had something. I might have had something else. Oh yeah, I was going to ask you about your experience at Cal Poly Pomona and everything. And I know that they've grown quite a healthy Native student community there and everything. And how did you make the transition from ethnic studies and into your work as an artist?
Well, that's the first part of the question. My experience at Cal Poly Pomona was wonderful. I was fortunate to work with and be mentored by Dr. Sandy Dixon, a great human being, and very passionate about, you know, serving our community, you know, to the best of her ability and create greater access to higher education. But it was wonderful. I was able to serve in a role of mentorship, working with with young folks for a pipeline program they put on for many years during the summer and also during the school year as well. Just trying to help, advocate, trying to get folks into higher education and, extend those opportunities and see that it's accessible. But yeah, the community has definitely grown on campus and they're still doing great work as well. I was fortunate enough to actually collaborate with my alma mater on an event recently, did a demonstration. So grateful and fortunate to have that opportunity. And what was the second portion of your question? It kind of slipped my mind.
No. How would you, do you the transition from ethnic, it was ethnic and gender studies was your major?
Yes.
Yeah, to your work as an artist. Was it was a pretty smooth transition? Yeah, no?
Yes and no. Like I'd always been kind of creating artwork, and like during the time where I feel like my art really came into fruition was when I like changed my major. I actually started school as like an economics major and wanted to get into consulting and for working within indigenous communities in the field of economics. That's what I thought I wanted to do. But the field of study itself is inherently problematic and rested in, capitalist ideology. And, so like I was struggling with that at the time. So when I first started creating art, it was, I changed my major, and that really like, changed things. Like just like from the books that I was reading, the people that I was around, and just the way of thinking, right? It's totally different from econ. And, I was creating artwork during that time. And soon after, when I graduated, I entered graduate school and decided to eventually drop out, quit school. Because this wasn't what I thought it was going to be like at all. And the mentorship that I had at Cal Poly Pomona was so wonderful. And I just didn't have that at the graduate level and had the support either. So it was really challenging for me. And, it was always been making art, this and that. I kind of just like, well, what am I going to do now? Type of situations. Like, well, I make art. So it's slowly started gravitating towards full-time work and my career where I'm at now. So it's kind of like a sink or swim type of situation. Like, oh man, I have one asset, not one asset, but like, this is like, I think the most important asset that I do have. And like, how can I work with this? And luckily, like I had mentioned, I've been able to, receive mentorship from different artists. And like I previously mentioned in this conversation, Jake Fraggle was really integral during that early part of my career to encourage me to create art and feel confident in moving forward in that path. And, like education is, to me, like now my education serves, I think really informs the artwork that I produce. And yeah, in many ways, like, like I'm constantly referring to like different books and authors and thinkers and a lot of my work, but also just, the way of critically analyzing things and trying to interpret stuff from a different perspective. So I believe my education really informs my work in that way.
Very good. Very good. Thank you so much again, River. I really, really appreciate you taking the time on a Saturday to be a part of our speaker series and everything. I think your work is so important. And it's amazing to see a young California native artist like yourself doing so well. And again, I'm just grateful to be, and please, if you ever feel inclined, please always submit to the magazine. I always am so excited to have your work in the magazine, and a lot of our readers have said too that they enjoy kind of seeing your evolution as an artist, and so it's always exciting. Thanks everybody who joined us today. We're going to have our next program on the 20th. So on Friday, this has been a wonderful experience so far, being able to talk to artists during the pandemic about, what life has been like and how they're remaining inspired to keep us all inspired as well. Thank you all so much. And be sure to visit newsfromnativecalifornia.com to kind of catch up on other things that are going on in the community, and to also subscribe to the magazine. So thanks so much again, River. I appreciate you so much.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you everyone for taking the time to be here. Extremely humbled and grateful for this opportunity. Thank you so much. Encourage all of you to, engage in that creative process. But yeah, I'm just so thankful and humbled to be here today. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks so much.